23 years old, basketball scholarship to Duke University, and Marcus Williams had no idea the man his mother just humiliated in the parking lot was the reason he could afford to be there. The autumn rain drummed against the windshield of the 15-year-old Honda Civic as David Thompson pulled into the visitor parking space at Riverside Country Club. The engine made that familiar rattling sound it had been making for months, but David didn't mind. Some of his fondest memories were tied to this car. He stepped out, adjusting his simple navy sweater and khakis. Nothing fancy, nothing that would draw attention. That's exactly how he preferred it. David had learned long ago that wealth didn't need to announce itself. Real power whispered. The country club's valet rushed toward him, probably assuming he was lost. David waved him off politely and headed toward the main entrance, his worn leather messenger bag slung over his shoulder. Inside that bag was a check that would change someone's life forever, but first he had to get through the front door. "Excuse me, sir." The hostess at the reception desk looked him up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Are you here for the staff entrance? Kitchen deliveries are around back." David smiled patiently. He'd been through this before. "I'm here for the scholarship committee meeting. David Thompson." She frowned, scanning her list. Her perfectly manicured finger stopped at his name, and her expression shifted to confusion. "Oh, I see. Well, you can wait in the lobby. They'll call you when they're ready." 20 minutes passed. David watched members in their tennis whites and golf attire stream past, some glancing at him curiously. He didn't belong here, and everyone could see it. That was fine. He'd never needed to belong anywhere. "David Thompson?" A woman in her 50s approached, wearing an expensive pantsuit and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. Dr. Patricia Williams, according to the name tag clipped to her Hermes handbag. She was the chair of the scholarship committee and, more importantly, the mother of the young man whose future David had been quietly securing for the past 4 years. "Mrs. Williams." David stood, extending his hand. "Thank you for making time to meet with me." She glanced at his hand briefly before shaking it, her grip quick and dismissive. "Of course. Though I have to say, when you requested this meeting, I expected someone more substantial. The Hampton Foundation has been quite mysterious about their benefactors." David nodded. The Hampton Foundation was his private charitable organization, named after the street where he'd grown up in poverty. Very few people knew he was behind it. "I prefer to keep things simple." "Simple." Patricia repeated the word like it left a bad taste in her mouth. "Well, shall we discuss your son's upcoming semester abroad program in London?" They made their way through the club's marble-floored corridors, past oil paintings of long-dead members and displays of golf trophies. Patricia walked slightly ahead, as if she didn't want to be seen with him. "Marcus has been accepted to Oxford's summer intensive program," she said without looking back. "It's quite competitive. Only 12 students from American universities are selected each year. The cost is substantial, but as you know, the Hampton Foundation has been covering his expenses." David did know. He'd been covering all of Marcus's expenses since the young man was a high school sophomore struggling to make ends meet. Basketball shoes, training camps, SAT prep courses, application fees, tuition, room and board, textbooks, even spending money. Every penny came from David's personal account, filtered through the Hampton Foundation to maintain anonymity. Marcus Williams was brilliant, a natural leader, the kind of young man who would change the world if given the chance. David had recognized that potential 4 years ago when he'd seen Marcus playing pickup basketball at the community center in David's old neighborhood. Marcus had been wearing shoes held together with duct tape, but his determination was unshakable. When David learned the boy's family couldn't afford the registration fee for the showcase tournament that would put him in front of college scouts, David had made his first anonymous donation. It was supposed to be a one-time thing, but something about Marcus reminded David of himself at that age. Hungry, determined, unwilling to let circumstances define his future. "The Oxford program will cost $47,000. Patricia continued as they reached the committee room. "Frankly, I'm surprised the Hampton Foundation continues to be so generous. Marcus is a good student, but there are so many deserving young people." Your son is exceptional, David said quietly. His professors speak very highly of his character. Patricia turned to study him more carefully. Have you met Marcus personally? No. David lied smoothly. I prefer to maintain professional distance with scholarship recipients. In truth, David had been to several of Marcus's basketball games. Always in the cheap seats, always anonymous. He'd watched Marcus grow from a scrappy teenager into a confident young man. He'd seen him graduate as valedictorian, watched him give a speech about overcoming adversity that had brought the audience to tears. Marcus had no idea his anonymous benefactor existed. As far as he knew, he'd won a merit-based scholarship from a foundation that supported underprivileged students with academic and athletic potential. They entered the committee room where 3 other committee members waited. David recognized them from the society pages. Old money, country club royalty, the kind of people who'd never known what it felt like to choose between buying groceries and paying rent. Everyone, this is David Thompson from the Hampton Foundation, Patricia announced. He's here to discuss continued funding for the Williams Scholarship. The introductions were brief and cool. David could feel their judgment in every handshake, every polite smile. His Honda Civic in the parking lot might as well have been a scarlet letter. Please sit, said committee member Robert Sterling, gesturing to a chair that felt more like an interrogation spot than a place of honor. David settled in, placing his messenger bag carefully beside him. Inside was the check he'd come to deliver. Not just for Marcus's Oxford program, but for the establishment of an endowment that would fund 10 more students just like him. $2.5 million. The equivalent of pocket change for David, but life-changing money for young people who deserved a chance. Now then, Patricia said, settling into her chair with the authority of someone who'd never been denied anything. Let's discuss Marcus's future. What she didn't know was that Marcus's future had been secure for years. What she couldn't have imagined was that the man she'd dismissed as unworthy of her attention had already given her son more than she could ever provide. And what was about to happen would change everything she thought she knew about worthiness, generosity, and the true meaning of power. David Thompson was about to teach Riverside Country Club Scholarship Committee a lesson they'd never forget. He just had to survive the next hour first. The committee room felt smaller with every passing minute. David sat quietly as Patricia Williams launched into what could only be described as a performance. You have to understand, she said, addressing the room while gesturing toward David like he was an unfortunate piece of furniture. The caliber of students we typically support here at Riverside. Our scholarship recipients come from the finest preparatory schools. They have connections, breeding, proper backgrounds. David's hands remained folded in his lap. He'd learned long ago that silence was often the most powerful response to ignorance. Robert Sterling nodded approvingly. Patricia raises an excellent point. The Hampton Foundation's choice to support, well, let's call them urban students, is admirable, but perhaps misguided. These children often lack the social framework necessary to succeed in elite academic environments. Marcus Williams is currently maintaining a 4.0 GPA at Duke University, David said quietly. Patricia waved dismissively. Oh, I'm sure he's bright enough, but there's more to success than grades, Mr. Thompson. There's character, sophistication, the ability to move in proper circles. She stood and walked to the window, her heels clicking against the polished floor. From here she could see the parking lot where David's Honda Civic sat among the Mercedes, BMWs and Teslas like a sore thumb. For instance, Patricia continued, Marcus called me last week asking about proper attire for academic conferences. Proper attire. At 23 years old, he doesn't know how to dress for professional settings. These are the gaps that scholarship programs like yours create. David felt something twist in his chest. Marcus had called him too, actually. Not about attire, but to share his excitement about presenting his research on sustainable urban development at an international conference in Geneva. Marcus had been selected to represent Duke University alongside only 2 other students. David had been prouder of Marcus in that moment than of any business deal he'd ever closed. Perhaps, said committee member Eleanor Hartwell, we should focus our efforts on students who already possess the necessary social foundation. Save everyone the embarrassment of adjustment difficulties. The word embarrassment hung in the air like a challenge. David's mind drifted, as it often did when confronted with this particular brand of cruelty. He thought about his own journey from the Hampton Street projects to the corner office of Thompson Industries. How many Patricia Williams had he encountered along the way? How many times had people looked at his background, his accent, his inability to discuss yacht clubs and Swiss boarding schools, and deemed him inferior? 27 years earlier, David had been Marcus's age when he'd walked into his first board meeting as the youngest partner in Hampton Investment Group's history. He'd worn his only suit, purchased from a department store clearance rack, and carried a briefcase that had cost him 2 weeks' salary. The other partners had made their assumptions immediately. Urban background, state school education, obviously a diversity hire. They'd learned differently soon enough. David's portfolio had outperformed every senior partner within 18 months. His innovative approach to sustainable investing had revolutionized the firm's strategy. Within 5 years, he'd bought them out completely and rebranded the company as Thompson Industries. But first, he'd had to sit through meetings exactly like this one. Meetings where his worth was measured by the thread count of his shirts, rather than the content of his character. Patricia's voice pulled him back to the present. "I mean, honestly," she was saying, "when I dropped Marcus off for his freshman orientation, do you know what he said to me? He thanked me for driving him instead of making him take the bus. The bus, as if I would ever allow my son to arrive at Duke University on public transportation." The other committee members chuckled appreciatively. David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He knew that story. Marcus had told it differently, though. Marcus had been grateful because he'd never had anyone care enough to drive him anywhere important. His mother's gesture had meant everything to him. But that wasn't the version Patricia was sharing with her country club friends. "And don't get me started on the girlfriend situation," Patricia continued, warming to her theme. "He's been dating the same girl since high school. Sweet enough, I suppose, but she works at a retail store. Can you imagine? My son could date anyone. Sorority presidents, daughters of senators, and he chooses a shop girl." David knew about Jasmine, too. She was studying early childhood education at North Carolina Central University, working part-time to pay her own way through school. Marcus talked about her constantly during their brief phone calls. Her kindness, her intelligence, her dreams of opening a preschool in underserved communities. She sounded exactly like the kind of woman who would make Marcus happy for the rest of his life. "Perhaps," suggested Robert Sterling, "the foundation's resources might be better allocated to students who would use their education to move in more elevated social circles. Students who understand the responsibility that comes with privilege." "Exactly," Patricia exclaimed. "Education is wasted on people who don't appreciate its true value." Marcus sees his degree as job training. He talks about giving back to his community and making a difference. It's all very noble but terribly naive. Eleanor Hartwell leaned forward conspiratorially. "What this program needs is better screening. Family backgrounds, social connections, financial history. We shouldn't be throwing money at every sob story that comes along." David's messenger bag seemed to grow heavier beside his chair. Inside was a check that would fund not one sob story, but dozens of them. Young people like Marcus who understood that education wasn't about elevation, it was about transformation. "Mr. Thompson," Patricia turned to address him directly. "Surely you understand our concerns? The Hampton Foundation can't just hand out money without considering the bigger picture. What kind of return on investment are you really getting?" The question hung in the air, like an accusation. David thought about Marcus's last letter. Yes, the young man still wrote actual letters, a habit David found refreshingly thoughtful. Marcus had described his internship at a nonprofit focused on affordable housing development. He'd written about late nights spent drafting proposals, about communities that had been overlooked for decades, about his determination to prove that zip codes didn't determine destinies. "Perhaps you're right," David said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "Perhaps we should reconsider our approach." Patricia's face lit up with triumph. "Wonderful. I knew you'd see reason. Now, about Marcus's Oxford program, I think we can arrange alternative funding through more appropriate channels. People who understand what quality education is really worth. She moved toward the door, clearly ready to conclude what she saw as a successful negotiation. Just one more thing, David said, reaching for his messenger bag. He pulled out a manila folder and placed it on the polished conference table. Inside were 4 years' worth of documentation. Every payment, every scholarship disbursement, every anonymous donation that had made Marcus Williams's education possible. And clipped to the front was a photograph that Marcus had sent him last month. Marcus in his cap and gown at Duke's honors ceremony, holding his Dean's List certificate, beaming with pride and joy. Before we make any changes, David said quietly, I think you should see the complete financial record of your son's education. Patricia's hand froze on the door handle. If this story is touching your heart, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. The silence that followed would be the last peaceful moment in Patricia Williams's perfectly curated world. Patricia Williams turned slowly from the door, her face a mask of confusion and growing dread. The manila folder on the conference table seemed to pulse with dangerous energy. I'm sorry, what did you just say? Her voice had lost its commanding tone, replaced by something smaller and uncertain. David opened the folder with deliberate care. The first document was a payment receipt dated 4 years ago. Hampton Foundation to Riverside Preparatory Academy. Amount, $15,000. Purpose, basketball showcase tournament registration and equipment for Marcus Williams. Patricia's eyes widened as she read the heading. She moved closer to the table, her perfectly composed facade beginning to crack. This is, she whispered, then stopped. David laid out the next document. Hampton Foundation to SAT Prep Academy. $12,000. Marcus Williams, Intensive Summer Program. Then another. Hampton Foundation to Duke University. First semester tuition, room, board. $68,000. And another. Spring semester, summer programs, books, living expenses, basketball gear, academic conference travel funds. With each document David placed on the table, Patricia's face grew paler. The other committee members leaned forward, their casual superiority evaporating as the magnitude of what they were seeing became clear. 4 years, David said quietly, continuing to lay out receipts like a dealer shuffling cards. 137 separate payments, total amount $426,000. The number hung in the air like a thunderclap. Robert Sterling's mouth fell open. That's more than most people make in a decade. Patricia sank into her chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. No, this can't be right. Marcus won an academic scholarship, merit-based. The Hampton Foundation evaluates hundreds of applications. The Hampton Foundation, David said, pulling out another document, is a private charitable organization established in 1998. It has precisely one board member, one decision-maker, one benefactor. He placed his business card on top of the pile of receipts. David Thompson, founder and CEO, Thompson Industries, chairman, Hampton Foundation. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia stared at the card as if it were written in a foreign language. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, turned it over, read it again. You, she whispered. You're the Hampton Foundation? I am. Eleanor Hartwell leaned forward, studying David with new eyes. Thompson Industries, the sustainable technology conglomerate, the company that revolutionized clean energy infrastructure. David nodded. Thompson Industries was worth approximately $2.7 billion. He'd built it from nothing, transforming a small investment firm into one of the most innovative companies in America. His personal net worth had been estimated by Forbes at $1.4 billion, though he never paid attention to such rankings. Money was just a tool. What mattered was what you built with it. Patricia's voice was barely audible. But your car, your clothes, you look like someone who doesn't belong here? David finished gently. Yes, I know. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. A simple iPhone, nothing fancy. He scrolled to his photos and held it up for the committee to see. The image showed Marcus Williams on a basketball court, but not the gleaming Duke facilities they might have expected. This was the community center court in David's old neighborhood 4 years ago. Marcus was 17, all knees and elbows, wearing shoes held together with duct tape and a determination that could light up a city. "I was driving through Hampton Street," David said, his voice soft with memory. "I just closed a deal to build sustainable housing in that neighborhood. $300 million project. I stopped to see the site and heard the sound of a basketball bouncing." He swiped to the next photo. Marcus making an impossible shot while 3 older boys tried to block him. 15 kids on that court, but only one who helped a younger child tie his shoes when they came untied. Only one who shared his water bottle when another kid looked thirsty. Only one who stayed after everyone else went home to pick up the trash that had blown onto the court. Patricia was staring at the photos with an expression David couldn't quite read. Horror, maybe. Or recognition. "I watched him for an hour," David continued. "His talent was obvious, but his character was extraordinary. So I looked into his situation." Another photo. This one showed a modest apartment building, its paint peeling but its windows clean and bright with flower boxes. Single mother working 2 jobs, no father in the picture. Marcus maintaining a 4.0 GPA while helping his neighbors with their kids, tutoring middle schoolers for free, volunteering at the community center every weekend. David put the phone away and looked directly at Patricia. "Your son, Mrs. Williams, is the most remarkable young man I've ever had the privilege to support. His lack of sophistication is actually humility. His poor social connections are deep community bonds. His naive desire to give back is the kind of character that changes the world." The words hit Patricia like physical blows. She sat frozen, her carefully constructed worldview crumbling piece by piece. Robert Sterling cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mr. Thompson, David, I think there's been some misunderstanding here. We had no idea about your background, your contributions. If we'd known who you were, you'd have treated me differently?" David asked. "Why? Because of my net worth? Because of my company's reputation?" He gestured toward the window, toward the parking lot where his old Honda sat surrounded by luxury vehicles. "That car out there has 600,000 miles on it. I bought it used when I was 25 years old just after I closed my first major deal. I've kept it because it reminds me where I came from. It reminds me that your worth isn't measured by what you drive or where you live or how much money you have in the bank." Eleanor Hartwell was studying the receipts with growing amazement. $426,000, she murmured. Anonymous donations, no recognition, no publicity. "You never even met him?" "I attended his high school graduation," David admitted. "Sat in the back row, watched him give the valedictorian speech about believing in yourself even when others don't believe in you. I attended his first Duke basketball game, watched him score 23 points and then spend 20 minutes after the game signing autographs for kids from the local youth center." Patricia finally found her voice. "But why? Why would you do all this for a stranger?" David was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old pain and hard-won wisdom. "Because 30 years ago, I was 17 years old, living in those same Hampton Street projects. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. I was smart enough for college but had no way to pay for it. No connections, no advocates. No one who believed a kid from the projects could amount to anything." He pulled out one more document from his folder, a faded scholarship letter from State University, dated 32 years ago. "Someone took a chance on me, an anonymous benefactor through a small foundation, paid for my entire education, tuition, books, housing, everything. I never knew who it was. Never got to say thank you." Patricia's eyes were filled with tears now, her composure completely shattered. "When I built my fortune, I swore I'd pass it forward. I've funded 738 scholarships over the past 26 years. Full rides for kids who have everything except opportunity. Marcus is just one of many." He stood up, gathering the documents with the same careful precision he'd used to lay them out. But here's what makes Marcus special. It's not his grades or his athletic ability or his potential earnings. It's who he is when he thinks no one is watching. It's the way he treats people who can't do anything for him. It's the way he values family and community over status and wealth. David looked directly at Patricia, his expression gentle but unflinching. You raised an extraordinary son, Mrs. Williams, not because of his education or his opportunities, but because of his heart. The question is, do you see that? Or are you too busy being embarrassed by where he came from to appreciate who he's becoming? The committee room fell silent except for the soft sound of Patricia Williams weeping into her hands. Outside, thunder rumbled across the sky. The storm was getting worse, but inside something else was building. Something that would change everything. The sound of Patricia Williams crying filled the committee room like a confession. Her perfectly applied makeup ran in dark streaks down her cheeks, and her hands shook as she tried to process the magnitude of her mistake. David reached into his jacket and offered her his handkerchief, a simple white cotton square, the kind his mother had taught him to carry. Patricia took it without looking up, her sobs coming in waves. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I never thought." "You thought exactly what you were taught to think," David said gently. "We all make assumptions. The question is what we do when we realize we're wrong." Eleanor Hartwell was studying David with something approaching awe. 738 scholarships, she repeated. That's extraordinary." "It's necessary," David corrected. "There are brilliant kids in every neighborhood, every school, every community. They just need someone to believe in them." Robert Sterling leaned back in his chair, looking like a man whose entire worldview had just been rearranged. "I have to ask, why the secrecy? Why not take credit for what you've done? The recognition, the tax benefits, the social capital?" David smiled, a real smile this time. "Because the moment you do something for recognition, it stops being about them and starts being about you. These kids don't need a savior complex, they need opportunity." Patricia finally looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "Marcus calls about you sometimes. He talks about the foundation angel. He says whoever is behind the Hampton Foundation saved his life. He wants to meet you someday to say thank you." "He doesn't need to thank me," David said. "His success is thanks enough." The committee room door suddenly burst open, causing everyone to turn in surprise. Marcus Williams stood in the doorway, rain-soaked and breathing hard, still wearing his Duke basketball warm-up gear. "Mom, I got your message about an emergency meeting. Is everything okay?" Patricia's face went white. Marcus was supposed to be in Durham, North Carolina, preparing for tomorrow's game against Carolina. The emergency text she'd sent an hour ago, asking him to come immediately, had been part of her plan to demonstrate to the Hampton Foundation representative how demanding and entitled scholarship students could be. It had been a test, a cruel demonstration meant to prove her point about their kind. Instead, it had become something else entirely. Marcus scanned the room, taking in his mother's tear-stained face, the scattered documents on the table, and the quiet man in the simple sweater who seemed somehow familiar. "Marcus," Patricia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to tell you something. About your scholarship. About everything." But before she could continue, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his face lit up with excitement. "Oh my God, Mom, you're not going to believe this. I just got the call. I've been selected for the Rhodes Scholarship. Oxford University full ride for graduate school. They said my essay about community service and giving back was the deciding factor." He practically bounced with excitement, his joy infectious despite the tension in the room. "I'm going to study sustainable urban development. Can you believe it? Oxford. I'm going to learn everything I can and then come back and help rebuild neighborhoods like the one where I grew up. I'm going to prove that where you start doesn't determine where you finish." Patricia began crying again, but these tears were different. These were tears of pride, of love, of devastating regret for what she'd almost destroyed. Marcus noticed his mother's distress and immediately rushed to her side. "Mom, what's wrong? What happened?" David watched the interaction with quiet satisfaction. This was who Marcus Williams truly was. In a room full of strangers in the middle of his own triumph, his first instinct was to comfort his mother. "Marcus," David said softly, "congratulations on the Rhodes Scholarship. That's an extraordinary achievement." Marcus turned to look at David more carefully. There was something about the man's voice, something familiar but impossible to place. "Thank you, sir. I'm sorry, have we met?" Patricia took her son's hand, her voice shaking. "Marcus, this is David Thompson. He's the Hampton Foundation." Marcus stared blankly for a moment, the words not computing. "I'm sorry, what?" "He's been paying for everything," Patricia whispered. "Your high school tournaments, your SAT prep, Duke, all of it. Every single penny for 4 years. He's the foundation angel you've been wanting to thank." The basketball bag slipped from Marcus's shoulder and hit the floor with a soft thud. He stared at David with an expression of pure shock, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to find words. "You," Marcus finally managed. But that's impossible. The foundation, they said it was a committee, an organization." "It's just me," David said simply. "And now, if you'll allow it, I'd like to fund your Rhodes Scholarship as well." Marcus sank into the nearest chair, overwhelmed. "But why? Why would you do all this for someone you don't even know?" David pulled out his phone again and showed Marcus the photo from 4 years ago. 17-year-old Marcus on the community center court, helping tie a younger boy's shoes. "Because I do know you," David said. "I know your character. I know your heart. I know that you'll use every opportunity not to elevate yourself above others, but to lift others up with you." Marcus stared at the photo, tears forming in his eyes. "You were there that day?" "I've been to 15 of your basketball games," David admitted. "Always in the cheap seats, watched you score your first college points, watched you graduate summa cum laude, watched you become the man I always knew you could be." Marcus stood up abruptly and, without hesitation, wrapped David in a fierce hug. This wasn't the polite handshake of a business meeting or the careful distance of formal gratitude. This was the embrace of a son who had finally found the father figure he'd been searching for his entire life. "Thank you," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself." David returned the embrace, his own eyes filling with tears. In 30 years of business, in all his success and achievements, nothing had ever felt as meaningful as this moment. Patricia watched through her tears as her son embraced the man she had spent the afternoon humiliating. The irony was almost unbearable. "Mr. Thompson," she said, standing on unsteady legs, "I owe you the deepest apology of my life. The things I said today, the way I treated you." David gently separated from Marcus and turned to face her. "Mrs. Williams, you don't owe me anything. You gave the world Marcus. That's contribution enough for several lifetimes." "But I almost ruined it," Patricia said. "I almost let my pride and my prejudices destroy the most important relationship in his life." "Almost doesn't count," David said with a smile. "What matters is what happens next." He reached into his messenger bag one final time and pulled out an envelope. Inside was not just funding for Marcus's Rhodes Scholarship, but something else entirely. "The Marcus Williams Community Center," David said, handing Marcus the architectural plans. $15 million to build a state-of-the-art facility in your old neighborhood. Basketball courts, computer labs, tutoring centers, college prep programs, everything you've been dreaming about. Marcus unfolded the plans with shaking hands. The building was beautiful, modern, designed to serve hundreds of kids just like he had been. "There's one condition," David continued. "You have to promise me something." "Anything," Marcus said without hesitation. "Promise me you'll never forget where you came from. Promise me you'll always remember that success isn't about what you achieve, it's about what you make possible for others." Marcus nodded, unable to speak through his tears. David turned to address the entire committee. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm establishing the Marcus Williams Scholarship Endowment. $50 million to fund full scholarships for students from underserved communities. Mrs. Williams, I'd like you to chair the selection committee. Patricia's eyes widened in shock. Me? But after what I said today, especially because of what you said today, David replied. You understand now what I learned years ago, that character isn't about where you shop or what you drive or how you pronounce certain words. Character is about how you treat people when you think it doesn't matter. He gathered his documents and placed them back in his messenger bag. Outside, the storm was beginning to clear, late afternoon sunlight breaking through the clouds. Marcus, enjoy Oxford, study hard, change the world. And remember, you never have to thank me, just pay it forward. As David walked toward the door, Marcus called after him. Mr. Thompson, will I see you again? David paused, his hand on the door handle. Marcus, I've been watching over you for 4 years. Do you really think I'm going to stop now? He walked out into the clearing afternoon, leaving behind a room full of people whose lives had been forever changed by the encounter. Patricia Williams stood at the window, watching as David Thompson climbed into his 15-year-old Honda Civic. The engine turned over with its familiar rattle, and he drove away as quietly as he had arrived. Mom, Marcus said softly, joining her at the window. That man just changed my life. Patricia put her arm around her son's shoulders, finally understanding what she had almost lost. No, sweetheart, she whispered. You changed his life. You just reminded him why the work matters. As the Honda disappeared around the corner, Patricia Williams realized she had learned something invaluable that day. Real wealth wasn't about the car you drove, or the clubs you belonged to, or the people you impressed. Real wealth was about the lives you touched, the dreams you made possible, and the quiet generosity that asked for nothing in return, except the chance to make the world a little bit better. If this story moved you, don't stop here. Click the next one, subscribe, and share this with someone who still believes in kindness. Sometimes the most powerful people in the room are the ones who look like they don't belong there at all. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the simplest packages. And sometimes the people we're quickest to judge are the very ones who hold the power to change our lives forever. The next time you see someone in an old car or simple clothes, remember Marcus Williams and his foundation angel. Remember that character isn't about what you have, it's about what you give. And remember that the most extraordinary stories often begin with the most ordinary moments. Because you never know when the person you're talking to might just be the answer to prayers you didn't even know someone was praying.